Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the Spirit Side. I'm Paul James Caden, and today I really wasn't going to put out any more shows until after the New Year. I'm currently on holiday break, but I've been pondering a couple things that prompted me to hook up the microphone and do this podcast. It is currently 5:30 a.m., December 28th. And I just thought this would be a very kind of interesting show to end 2019 with. You know, we talk on this podcast a lot about strange things that are happening and spirituality. And there's a lot of other podcasts and video vlogs out there that talk about the paranormal and UFO sightings and all these different strange occurrences in our world. And I was just reading a couple of articles that were saying that 2019 was actually a record-breaking year for credible UFO sightings. I mean, these things were everywhere in 2019. And it really makes me wonder what is to come in 2020. It almost seems that over the last several years, there has been little by little more of an uptick in our world when it comes to UFO sightings, strange things happening, strange things being seen. We've had things like the mystery booms and these fissures opening in the earth, sinkholes all over the place, parts of the ocean seemingly drying up, wildlife dying. So what is going on? The truth has certainly been stranger than fiction of late on planet Earth. And in my other podcast with my co-host Stan Wanglin, we're going to be doing a show about the Mandela Effect and looking into this phenomenon is really what started taking my thinking in a little bit different direction. I was never really one to pay that much attention to the Mandela Effect because there's just a lot of I think craziness when it comes to this particular phenomenon, but some of it does seem like it's credible. Like here in the United States, or I don't know if they have it in other places, there is Jif peanut butter, and people remember it being Jiffy peanut butter. And other people don't remember Jiffy. I remember when I was a kid seeing commercials for Jiffy peanut butter. I remember Jiffy peanut butter. The character Curious George the monkey. Some people say that he had a tail. Others say that he never had a tail. I remember Curious George having a tail. The Monopoly game. Many people say they remember the Monopoly man having a monocle over his eye. Others say he never had it. I remember him having the monocle. I remember the old cartoon Looney Tunes being Toons, not Tunes. And here's one personally, if anyone out there listening to the podcast or watching on one of the video platforms where this podcast is posted. I also remember as a child in the United States seeing a commercial many times for a sandwich spread. It was like mayonnaise or Miracle Whip, and it was called Angel Whip. because it was supposed to be fluffy like a cloud, this fluffy mayonnaise or whatever it was. But no one remembers it. You can't find anything about it on the internet. And so I'm wondering if anyone else out there in their 40s or 50s remembers maybe back in the early 70s this mayonnaise, this sandwich spread called Angel Whip. Because it's something that I remember very vividly, but yet there's nothing about it. No old commercials, no articles hearkening back to what it was. No one seems to remember it. No one says they ever seen the commercials. So I'm curious, does anyone else out there remember Angel Whip? But sandwich spreads and Mandela Effect, notwithstanding here, I was really thinking in this podcast about reality. Because there are a lot of people that do feel and believe that we're living in some kind of simulation, that this isn't real. Some people believe that the UFOs and the aliens are what many call archons. And archons are a being from the Gnostic belief system. And if you read the Nag Hammadi, which is the Gnostic scriptures, they talk about these beings, the archons, that created this false matrix or world that we live in. And they keep us trapped here, feeding on our energy, deceiving us, playing God. And it kind of makes you wonder from a spiritual perspective. When you think about this particular world that we live in, this reality that we live in, and you have all of these government officials all over the world, bankers, presidents, senators, people that you wouldn't think would conceal these kind of things, but you have these individuals who consider themselves to be the elites, and they feel that they have some greater, deeper spiritual truth or insight into reality or the world or the universe or the way the universe works that the rest of us don't have. Many of them belong to these strange secret societies. And I know here in the United States, if you're listening outside of the country, many of our politicians gather once a year at a place called Bohemian Grove. And it looks like a cultic or an occultic ritual that they perform. They have this big statue of a pagan god. They wear the hooded robes. No one really knows what goes on there. But why would our politicians be involved in such peculiar behavior, rites, and rituals? Are these people privy to something that the rest of us are not? Is it, as some people say, that they're actually in contact with what we call extraterrestrials? And these extraterrestrials or extra-dimensional beings are giving these elitists some kind of material benefit for some reason. And are these benefits just part of the matrix, part of the trickery and deception that goes on in this reality? Because look how these people behave, though they claim to be religious and people of faith. Is the secret or the deeper truth that some of these people allegedly know? Is it just that they know that this reality isn't real? This is nothing but a computer game, and they're playing it to the hilt. Money, war, personal pleasures being gratified. Is this the big truth that they supposedly know that we don't? And is this why they try to silence people that get too close to uncovering that truth or making that truth more widely known? Now, the interesting thing is, when you look at that from, I guess, a little bit higher spiritual perspective, and you think about many of the religious leaders, or, the great founders of religions like Buddha and Jesus, and how all of them throughout time immemorial have said the same thing, and that is, don't be worldly, don't be like the world. Rise above this particular reality that we live in. Don't be attached to all of this. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have homes and possessions or jobs or anything like that and do what we have to do. But it means not being so steeped in this world and in this reality that it becomes the be-all and end-all, the most important thing in our thinking, in our lives. Is that how we become trapped? Is that how, as some people believe, when we die and the consciousness leaves this physical body, it's somehow tricked into coming back and reincarnating to become food or slaves of these aliens or archon beings? It's very interesting to think about. Now, of course, this is all speculation and theory based on little peculiar pieces of the puzzle that, you see out there in our world. But is this why someone like Buddha taught non-attachment? Not being moved by the things of this world that we live in, not giving into sorrow and greed and, being so attached to all of this that we transcend this reality. We don't come back to this reality. We go to nirvana, or where there is eternal bliss. Is this why Jesus taught, be in the world but not a part of it? Why he taught this world was not his home, it's not our home. Did these individuals know or glimpse something that we're just now in 2019 beginning to talk about? Reality, the matrix, what is reality? And it's not so much of a stretch when we talk about these things, because we do have credible scientists out there who talk about reality not being reality, that certain particles in the universe don't exist until they have an observer to observe them. We have scientists who are talking about a multiverse, different layers of reality, and that perhaps sometimes they intermingle or have some kind of a slip, and this is what the Mandela Effect would be. I was watching the movie The Mandela Effect last night, and they touched on a theory in there, and that's really what spurred me to do a whole podcast on the Mandela Effect on my other show, but also want to talk about some of these things and reality here on the spirit side. They touched on a theory in that movie that's out there, but you don't hear a lot about it, and I found it to be very interesting as well. And in the movie, there was a couple who had a daughter who died. She drowned, and they were saying, as we all say when someone passes away in real life, the wife was saying to the husband, "It doesn't feel real. This doesn't feel real." And as the husband got into the Mandela Effect, his thing was, well, his daughter's passing wasn't real. That maybe in some other reality she still existed, and that somehow he could get her back. Now, the theory being, which is interesting, we all say that when someone very close to us passes away. We all say it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like they're gone. Or some people will say, it almost feels like they were never here. I seen that person every day. Now it seems like their memory is so far away, but they've only been gone for a few weeks or a month. So why do we perceive it that way? Well, the theory being that in a multiverse, those people still exist. They're still alive in some reality or dimension that we don't perceive, perhaps occupying the same space as we do, but we just don't see them. And that perhaps this is why many times you'll hear people say, well, I feel the presence of my loved ones around me. I feel like they're still here. I feel like they're with me. Or people say they see a ghost or they hear a ghost, their deceased relative calling their name or saying something. But what they're actually not perceiving is a ghost, but they're picking up maybe briefly that alternate reality where that person is still alive. Again, perhaps occupying the same space as us, still living in the same house that we lived in with them. But we just don't perceive their presence. And now, another interesting theory would be, what if it is a multiverse? What if there are many different realities? But what if it's a copy of what Christ said, that in his Father's house, in God's house, there are many mansions. A lot of people in religion say that there are dark forces out there, and those dark forces try to mimic that of the light. So if there are many mansions or many dimensions or worlds in God's creation, the ultimate spiritual divine being of the universe, then what if the lower beings of the dark side, we'll call it, try to mimic that by having a multi-layered matrix that we currently live in? Instead of many, many rooms or many mansions, many layers. And when we leave one, sometimes they may drop us right into another one, and we wouldn't even know it. Or it would be like waking up from a dream. How many times have we had a dream that seemed so real? And when we woke up from that dream, we were like, it disturbed us somehow emotionally. We said it just felt like it was more than a dream. I was living in this other world, or this is what was happening. And I myself used to have a recurring dream that certain events would take place. And they seemed so real in the dream. And I actually remember thinking in the dream that, gee, I kind of remember a time or a lifetime when this terrible thing that's happening in my life right now wasn't happening. It was very peculiar. And then when I would wake up, those reoccurring dreams would seem to have a certain familiar feel to them. Like I almost remember something like that happening, but I don't remember when. So again, I wonder if some folks listening to this podcast have experienced something similar. And when that happens, are we remembering another layer of the matrix that maybe we occupied or lived in at one point, but we don't consciously remember it? And is that what some of these UFOs and cryptids are? Are they the archons? Are they the bad guys? Are they the designers of this matrix? Is this why certain people are abducted by aliens? Is this why UFOs seem to come out of nowhere and disappear into nowhere? Are they not coming from outer space or some other mysterious dimension, but another reality where they can just move through the layers of that matrix or that video game with ease? Because to them, to us, it seems like it's different dimensions, different realities. It's all very mysterious, but to them, it's just layers of an illusion that they could pass right through. Kind of like someone poking the end of a pencil through a mirage or through some kind of optical illusion. Is this what it's really all about? And is this why certain people who investigate these things, the paranormal or ufologists, if they get too close to a certain truth or get too much attention, is this why they get shut down? Because, as I said, maybe there are certain people in this world who are very privy to the non-reality of this world, but they want to make this their heaven, so to speak. Hey, we know this is an illusion. We know this isn't real. So let's just have a blast. It's like lucid dreaming. You know, you hear the term war games. Is that what it's all about? To some of these people in charge making these horrendous and bad decisions, is it just a game that they're playing and they know it? But they've sold their soul, so to speak, to prosper or be the winner of the game, or at least they think they will be the winner. You know, there's so much to think about when it comes to this question of reality and what is it. You have cases of people that have just disappeared into thin air, literally before someone else's eyes, never to be seen again. There are people who say they were walking or driving down the road and suddenly found themselves in very unfamiliar territory. And some reported that there were strange beings looking at them almost angrily, like they shouldn't be there. And then suddenly they were back in this reality. And then you have these mysterious strangers that show up. That we say, oh, you know, people say, oh, maybe they were time travelers because of the way they were dressed or the way that they acted, or here's somebody from years ago in a photo that looked like they had a cell phone. Well, maybe there are certain people that not necessarily travel through time, but figured out a way or have been granted permission to have a way to step through the layers of the illusion. Or maybe some people step through the layers of that illusion quite by accident at certain times. And is this what the Mandela Effect is? Is it not necessarily a purposeful changing in our reality? But maybe the beings who made this video game, so to speak, sometimes just make a mistake because they're not divine, they're not omnipresent, you know, they don't possess divine qualities of perfection. Just like someone here in our world creating all these realities in video games. And you could say, well, those video games are almost like another reality. You turn it on, you know, you can make the little characters do all these different things, react the way you want them to react. Now there's virtual reality that we can interact with these make-believe worlds. But in those make-believe worlds, there can be a glitch or a problem or a breakdown. Because we're not the creators of those video games are not divine. They can make a mistake. Things can break down. Things can go wrong. Again, just speculation on a lot of theories here. And I'm wondering in 2020 what's going to transpire. Because I feel like we're on the cusp of something there's too many people asking too many questions. There's too many inconsistencies in the script of life or reality that people are discovering. Now, some of it is nonsense. Some of it seems to be very credible. And is that what the agenda is when it comes to the elitists and the government? The agenda is just that, keeping you ignorant or keeping us ignorant that none of this is even real. It's just a big game. And they don't want the common person to know that, because that changes everything. The whole structure could fall apart for them and for the creators of the video game. Because now we're just not going to play anymore in this system that you've created for us. And is that what the Bible talks about? Is that what Jesus talked about? Is that what we call the end of time or the end of the age? That mankind does become more enlightened. Mankind wakes up, at least a certain number of us. And we dismantle, we dissolve this virtual reality that we're living in. And move on to something greater, move on to ultimate reality. As you hear many spiritual people say throughout the ages, that the spirit world is the real world. This is just a copy of it. Could that be a copy that is meant to deceive us? And is that what enlightenment is? Rising above all of this and becoming free from this multi-layered illusion that we have been thrust into or put into for some reason that we don't quite understand. Because someone or something is playing God. And that's also not so far out of the question. Men try to play God, governments, certain scientists. Why wouldn't there be other beings in the universe that can do things far beyond what we know? And they're playing God. They're not God, but they're playing God. And they're the ones we get our influence and inspiration from when we play God. We're mimicking or being inspired by these things somehow, directly or indirectly. Fascinating and heavy stuff that I've laid on you in this podcast. I hope it didn't spin your head too much, but these are very interesting things to talk about, and they are theories that are out there. And who's to say they're not true? Man has struggled for centuries, since man was able to think and talk and read and write. What is the meaning of life? What is reality? What is all this about? What is God? What is heaven? What is nirvana? What is paradise? What is enlightenment? Could the things we've talked about in this podcast be part of the answer? The key that opens the door? The tip of a much larger iceberg? These are the things I've been pondering as I've been doing my research and thinking about future podcasts. And I thought this would just be a great end of the year show. That maybe as we step over the threshold into a new year, 2020, come what may, maybe we can put some of this information in our back pocket. And if things start ramping up or get too weird in our world, we can hearken back to this and say, maybe there's something to it. Maybe that's what alien disclosure is all about. Maybe that's what the big agenda is all about with the governments. Maybe they want to keep playing the game. And all of their lies and all of their disclosures and all of their this and that and the other thing is just more of the show, more of the illusion, because they know more and more people are starting to ask questions and notice things and talk about things that they didn't really think that the mass populace would. And excuse me there, it's early morning. I got a bit of a frog in my throat. It keeps cropping up on me here. But is that what all of the agendas are about? Just keeping one step ahead, saying, oh, yes, there are no aliens, but now people are seeing too many things. Well, yes, we've seen them everywhere. These UFOs, they've been everywhere. Is it just more lies to keep perpetuating the lie so they don't ultimately get found out and end their little game? And there's some people that say these government officials and religious leaders and the things that they do. I've talked about this in a previous podcast. Some hypothesize that they're not even humans. They are the aliens or the archons or the whatever these beings are, inserting themselves in the matrix. They look like us, but they're not us. Now that's certainly a quite out there on the fringe theory, but hey, perhaps the truth is much, much stranger than reality as we know it. But anyway, folks, thanks for listening. I always appreciate you tuning in. I'm sure we'll talk more about these things in the coming new year. Until then, happy holidays, happy new year, and I'll see you all in 2020.